This may be the worst animated movie ever released in Chinese cinema. I think Europe should put it in the museum. Breaking tonight, China may have accidentally invented an entirely new film genre. A movie that succeeded because everyone agrees it's diabolically bad. Meet Niu Lai, an 86-minute Chinese animated film that, in its first 9 days in theater, made just 7,169 yuan, roughly $1,000. And then the internet found it. People saw the animation clips and asked, how is this in a movie theater? And then naturally started buying tickets to find out. Their curiosity went viral. Cinema started adding screenings, and the movie's box office climbed from just 7,000 yuan to over 5 million. That's more than 700,000 US dollars, and it's still going up, which sounds like a joke. But unfortunately for all of us, I think this might actually be revolutionary. This animation looks like unfinished 3D models pulled straight out of a 90s interior design program. The dialogue occasionally sounds like it arrived from another dimension. The voice acting was done by the filmmakers themselves, and the plot has the structural confidence of a dream you're trying to explain to a friend 5 minutes after you wake up. Yeah, it was a dream on the prairie. I think I was a leopard, there were birds, and I think you were the cow. But wait, the audience. They loved it. So naturally, the internet arrived at two completely reasonable conclusions. 1, this is garbage. 2, this is Andrei Tarkovsky. People started comparing it to stream of consciousness cinema, French New Wave, Dadaism, even Marcel Duchamp. Yes, the guy who put a urinal in an art exhibition and made the argument itself part of the artwork. Some called Niu Lai the Chinese cinema version of The Room. Others called it the revival of cult cinema. And inevitably, cult cinema. Someone should put this in a contemporary art museum. Would I like to watch unsuspecting New Yorkers walk into Film at Lincoln Center and encounter this? Absolutely. And this is where things got genuinely interesting. Because some professional filmmakers reportedly looked at this sudden popularity and said, essentially, this is bad for Chinese cinema. The argument was that rewarding work this amateur could lower standards and push genuinely accomplished films even further out of the market. In Chinese, there's an old phrase, bad money drives out good money. But the internet came up with a new update. Hell money drives out the bad money. So the audience position was basically, you think this is lowering the standards? Have you seen the standards? And then Niu Lai developed what may be my favorite publicity campaign of the year, mostly because there was no campaign, no publicity. When theaters suddenly added more screenings, most of them didn't even have the proper posters ready. So individual cinemas began making their own. And they're glorious. Every theater appears to have received the same creative brief, and one that literally says, leave the theater now, before it's too late. We warned you. Normally, a distributor would be horrified, but for Niu Lai, every terrible homemade poster made the legend even better. And then the audience started posting clips recording inside the theaters, which, to be clear, is generally not how copyright law would prefer you to experience a motion picture. But in this particular case, the clips seemed to function more like a wildlife footage. People would post 30 seconds and everyone else would go, there's no way the entire movie looks like this, and then buy a ticket. That is remarkable. Some viewers naturally began wondering, was this an elaborate PR stunt? And I will say this, If someone planned all of this, the terrible posters, the bootleg footages, the memes, the ironic ticket buying, forget film school. Whoever did this should be running Apple. This would be Charlie XCX gnarly, brat level of anti-marketing. We're talking madmen of modern China. But the much more interesting possibility is that nobody planned it. Because then, what happened to Niu Lai wasn't really marketing. It was participation. The audience didn't simply watch the movie, they started building the mythology around it. Because a movie used to be a finished object. A filmmaker made it, the audience received it. But now, the audience can finish it. And then something even stranger happened. People started getting protective of it. Because the more audiences learned about how Niu Lai was made, the harder it became to treat it just as another cynical bad movie. From the information available about the production, the entire team was basically two people, the director and his mother. She composed the music, voiced one of the characters, and even sang the ending credit song. It's actually a really beautiful song. That's it. That was the whole production team. There was no famous franchise attached to it. And importantly, for a film released in 2026, no AI shortcut. Someone apparently did make an AI version afterward, which only seemed to prove the point. AI couldn't make something this bad. And strangely, I understand what they mean, because AI can learn patterns, but Niu Lai feels like something it has never encountered a pattern. It is bad in a way that feels intensely personal. Chinese audiences have seen mediocre bad movies before, cheap knockoffs riding on famous IPs. Those were made because people was trying to make a commercial product as cheaply as possible, just to cash in. Niu Lai feels different. It feels like somebody was trying to make something and failed, perhaps spectacularly, at many of the normal technical standards of filmmaking, but they did try. That difference sounds tiny, but it isn't. Because there is an enormous difference between this is poorly made and nobody cared. Niu Lai looks like the filmmaker cared very much, possibly too much, possibly in directions nobody else quite understands. But they cared. And that sincerity has also created a more emotional response among viewers. Some neurodivergent viewers have said they felt genuinely seen by the movie, that something about its strange logic and emotional world just clicked with them. People who don't often see their way of thinking reflected on screen are basically saying, this strange thing makes sense to me. And once that happens, the question stops being, is this technically good? It becomes, who gets to decide what kind of expression deserves to exist? And I think this is where Niu Lai starts telling us something much larger than Niu Lai itself. Because you have to ask, why this movie? Why did a generation of Gen Z viewers suddenly decide that this extremely amateur film deserved not merely mockery, but tickets? Chinese cinema has obviously produced a lot of excellent films, but especially among younger audiences, there's a growing frustration of how formulaic commercial entertainment can feel. The same stars, the same formulas, the same safe structures. Hollywood knows this feeling too. You can sometimes watch a perfectly competent blockbuster and feels as if you've already seen it. Not this particular movie, just the movie. Niu Lai has the opposite problem. Nothing about it feels familiar. And maybe that's also part of the appeal. If professional entertainment has become incredibly polished but increasingly predictable, there's something weirdly exciting about encountering something that's clearly never passed through the machine. It reminds me of underground punk music. The idea of punk was never, these musicians are technically better than the conservatory trained professionals. Obviously not. The idea was, wait, are we allowed to do this? You don't need the perfect technique. You can just make the thing. And Niu Lai might be the cinematic version of someone plugging in a guitar they barely know how to play and discovering that the noise still means something to people. And then this happens. A filmmaker from outside the conventional directing pipeline makes an animated movie with his mother, and somehow it ends up in the Chinese equivalent of AMC. That alone is kind of incredible. And maybe that's part of why Gen Z audiences became so invested in keeping the story alive. Maybe they see a little bit of themselves in it, but not necessarily a 3D animation, hopefully. They saw this unfinished looking object and finished its meaning themselves. A crappy cinema poster became part of the artwork. A bad review became promotion. A theater full of people laughing became a communal performance. People don't just want to consume the finished product anymore. Sometimes they want to help build the world together. You don't necessarily have to come from a prestigious film school. You don't have to know the right people. You don't even necessarily have to make something that everybody agrees is good. Sometimes you make something so strange, so personal, and almost embarrassingly sincere, and somehow against every reasonable expectation, somebody finds it. And maybe your work can be seen too. Maybe your voice can be heard. I'm Macy Rain. I write songs and occasionally overthink pop culture. Until next time.